Number 1.
Figueroa was last seen driving away from her residence in the 7200 block of East Avenue 8-12 in Little Rock, California at 4 a.m. on May 19, 2015. She said she was going to Los Angeles, California for a short trip. Later, both her parents got a text message from her phone saying, "Had to leave, be home soon." Figueroa's parents don't believe this message was actually from her, however. She has never been heard from again. On May 30, her burgundy 2004 Mercedes-Benz SUV with the license plate number 5DGN 895 was found hidden inside an abandoned shed about 7 miles from her home. It had scratches on it as if it had been run off the road. Figueroa left behind a 2-year-old daughter, and her loved ones stated it was uncharacteristic of her to leave the child for extended time periods. She had, however, been having significant problems in her life. She associated with gang members, and her boyfriend, David Nash McKell, had been arrested in March 2015 and charged with murder. He was in jail when Figueroa disappeared and was later charged in connection with another double homicide. A photo of McKell is posted with this case summary. In December 2016, he pleaded guilty to 1 murder and was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Another murder case against him is pending. Prior to her disappearance, Figueroa had reportedly pledged allegiance to McKell's gang, AGK. She was using crystal methamphetamine and selling the drug to different gangs at the time of her disappearance. Both she and her daughter had been threatened because of this. Figueroa planned to her drug involvement, enter a rehabilitation program, move out of state with her daughter and enroll in college. Her father had set up an appointment for her to enter a drug treatment center. On the day of her disappearance, she delivered $20,000 in cash to a drug associate. This was supposed to be her last job. Both investigators and Figueroa's family believes she was murdered, and police have a suspect in her disappearance. They think her involvement with methamphetamine and local gangs was behind her disappearance. McKell initially agreed to help police in their investigation into her disappearance, then changed his mind after he was threatened. There are rumors that the people behind Figueroa's disappearance are also responsible for the disappearance of Michelle Russ, who lived in the same local area and disappeared 2 years before Figueroa did. This has not been confirmed. Both cases remain unsolved.
Number 2.
In 1977, Ivy lived in Compton, California with her mother, Earlene Williams, her sister, Violet Matory, and her half-sister, Yolanda Williams. On July 20, 1977, a boy named Sir Christopher Marshall was spending the night in the Williams-Matory home in the 300 block of East 131st Street. At 4:30 a.m., the house caught fire and burned to the ground. Earlene's body was found inside near the front door. She had been strangled. The children had all disappeared from the residence, and there was a trail of blood leading from the house down an alley, where it stopped. Earlene was estranged from her husband, James Williams, at the time of her death. They separated after James was charged with child molestation and rape in connection with the 1976 attack on Ivy. He was questioned and released a day after the fire, but arrested for murder the next day when the autopsy results proved Earlene had been a homicide victim. In August 1977, James was additionally charged with murdering the 4 missing children. Authorities stated the 3 girls were supposed to testify against him in the sexual abuse case, which was scheduled to go to court on July 21, the day before they disappeared. James was tried twice for murder, but the jury deadlocked both times, and in July 1979, before a third trial could take place, the 5 murder charges against him were dismissed. He is now deceased. In 2014, Ivy's skeletal remains were found in Corona, California, about an hour's drive east of Compton. The other children have never been located.
Number 3.
Eggleston was last seen in Portland, Oregon, on August 2, 1993. She left her job selling long-distance services for Alnet Communication Services Incorporated in Lake Oswego, Oregon. It was her first day on the job alone. That morning, she attended an Alnet meeting and made sales calls at businesses on Northeast Whitaker Way and stopped at a bank, a gasoline station and a Burger King restaurant near Lloyd Center. That afternoon, Eggleston made calls in the then Port of Portland building in the 700 block of Northeast Multnomah Street. 5 witnesses at the building stated she looked worried and preoccupied. At 2:15 p.m., a man to whom Eggleston had just made a sale saw her get off the building's elevator in the company of a man wearing a blue blazer. He is described as having dark hair and a dark complexion. Eggleston has never been heard from again, and the man she was last seen has never been identified. Shortly before 5 p.m., a witness noticed a silver gray Volkswagen Golf similar to Eggleston's parked in the Port of Portland parking lot. Eggleston's supervisor was scheduled to meet her at 5 p.m. in Lake Oswego, but she never arrived for the meeting. Eggleston's car was found by a security guard about 12:30 a.m. the day after she was last seen. The vehicle was in the parking lot of an industrial complex in the 12,000 block of Northeast Airport Way. The site is 9 miles from the Port of Oregon building. The vehicle was unlocked, its windows were rolled down, and the keys were in the ignition. Eggleston's purse and its contents were in the front seat, and her workout clothes were in the back seat, but her Alnet binder was missing. There were no indications that a struggle had taken place. Joel Patrick Courtney is considered a possible suspect in Eggleston's case. A photograph of him is posted with this case summary. He has a long history of criminal offenses, substance abuse and possible mental illness. In September 2009, he pleaded guilty to the kidnapping, rape and murder of Brooke Wilberger, who had been missing from Corvallis, Oregon since 2004, and led authorities to her body. Courtney has traveled extensively throughout his life. He is known to have been in Alaska, Florida, Arizona and Mexico, in addition to Oregon and New Mexico. Authorities believe he has harmed other women besides Wilberger, and Eggleston is considered a possible victim. Eggleston had just graduated from college, and Wilberger was a college sophomore. Both women had blonde hair and blue eyes, and they were close to the same age. Wilberger was 19 years old, just 3 years younger than Eggleston. It should be emphasized that as of yet there is no solid evidence to tie Courtney to Eggleston. Eggleston is not believed to have left of her own accord. She has no history of mental illness or runaway behavior, and she was close to her family, which included her parents, 3 sisters and 4 nieces and nephews. Her passport has never been located, however. She had recently graduated from Oregon State University, where she had been in a sorority. Foul play is suspected in Eggleston's case, which remains unsolved.
Number 4.
For 20 years, Micah Splund's little brother, Steve, has been missing. It's been a long time, Micah Splund said Friday, the anniversary of Steve's disappearance. It's amazing to think it's been 20 years. On January 9, 1994, Steve Splund, a tool and die maker who was engaged to be married, was remodeling his house in Moline, in the Prospect Park area, when he went to a friend's house to borrow a caulking gun. I guess they talked for a little while, and Steve left, Micah Splund said Friday. And that was the last time anyone has seen him. His fiancée reported him missing the next day, the day Steve's car was found parked east of the Interstate 74 bridge in Bettendorf. The car was searched, but police found no clues and no evidence of foul play. Repeated searches in many areas around the Quad Cities turned up little or nothing, and the case went cold. Now, though a review of the old files have provided new leads in the case. Initially, we received very few tips on this case, Moline Police Detective Scott Williams said Friday. However, after a full cold case review, detectives have been making inquiries, and we have received some very good tips, far more than when Steve initially disappeared. Detective Williams said authorities believe more than one person was involved in Steve's disappearance. The Henry County State's Attorney's Office, Henry County Sheriff's Department, the Illinois State Police and the Rock Island County State's Attorney's Office are assisting in the renewed probe, he said. We now have narrowed our scope to several individuals of interest, Detective Williams said. Now is the time to come forward to police. We believe some of the individuals were involved to a lesser extent. For years, family and friends have hiked and searched through woods and rivers in the hopes of finding the missing man. In the spring of 1994, a search party on Big Island, near the confluence of the Rock and Mississippi rivers, found reminders of the missing man, green bottles of Mountain Dew, Steve's favorite soft drink. Later that year at a search of the wooded hills of Loud Thunder Forest Preserve west of Andalusia, hikers found an insurance card belonging to Mr. Splund on the arm rail of a wooden bridge below the dam that forms Lake George. Moline police at the time said the card obviously had been placed where it was found and asked that whoever found it and placed it on the railing call police. Nothing came of it. There have been dozens and dozens of searches, Micah Splund said. We did a lot at the time Steve was reported missing. Some searches, we'd have 50 or 100 people. But then, sometimes, there were searches where maybe there were 4 of us. The weather at that time, 1994, was a lot like it is this year. It was really cold, and there was a lot of snow. Micah Splund names off the places they've searched for his brother, from the banks of the Mississippi River to Credit Island, Arsenal Island, Big Island and Sunset Marina, in addition to Loud Thunder. I've always kind of made it a point to try and not focus on any one thing, Micah Splund said. "I didn't want to rule out anything." Micah Splund said Steve's twin sister and mother live in Bettendorf. "It's still painful," he said, "and the family has remained close-knit. My mom couldn't really deal with it at the time," Micah Splund said. "It has gotten a little better over the years. They get together every Friday for dinner with their families, reinforcing a tight bond." Steve was quieter, not as outgoing, Micah Splund said. "He was real friendly, the kind of person who would do anything to help you if you needed help. That came up a lot, wondering if something happened that night, if he saw somebody stranded and tried to help. If he would have seen somebody stuck in the snow, Steve would have stopped and pulled in to help whether he knew the person or not." Micah Splund said until the last year, not much has happened on the case. He said Moline Police Detective Michael Griffin has worked with the family. "They just got some leads here recently," Micah Splund said. Micah Splund is married and lives in Moline. He works as a technology director for East Moline School District 37. He said life is as normal as it can be with a missing brother. "You know, you just have moments where you think about it more," he said. "It's rough during those times. Whenever the family gets together around the holidays, birthdays, you think more about him. There's been a lot of hope and prayers that things would happen, that we'd hear something," Micah Splund said. He's walked through snow and ice, tall weeds and rain, for miles and miles in search of something that would reveal part of Steve Splund's life and the mystery to his disappearance. "It would be great if Steve was out there," he said. "I think in today's computerized society, if that were the case, we would have heard something by now. I would like some kind of closure." Detective Williams said anyone with information can call Moline Police or Crime Stoppers. If the information leads to an arrest, they could receive up to $1,000 cash.
Number 5.
Coral was last seen in Flint, Michigan on September 22, 1998, the day after her 14th birthday. She lived with her grandmother, Lois Arlene Janish, and Janish's boyfriend in an apartment on Ann Arbor Street. She left her grandmother's apartment to go to another apartment upstairs and return a book. She never returned and was reported missing 2 days later. Earlier on the same day Coral disappeared, an older friend, Melissa Pierce, took her to the State Department of Human Services, DHS, to report she was being abused. Late that night, Coral called Pierce from a payphone at Ann Arbor and West Court Streets near the White Horse Tavern. Coral said she was having trouble at home and needed to leave Flint. She asked Pierce if she could go and live with her. Pierce was in another part of the state at the time. She got a ride to Flint with her uncle, but by the time they arrived Coral had vanished. Pierce and her uncle drove around looking for her, but couldn't find her. She has never been heard from again. Coral was raised by her grandmother, Lois Janish, as her mother was found to be an unfit parent. Her mother, who maintained sporadic contact with her, died of a drug overdose in 1996. Her father's identity is unknown. Coral grew up in poverty. She and Janish changed residences frequently and often relied on public assistance, such as food stamps, to meet their needs. Her younger half-sister was raised separately from Coral and eventually placed in foster care. The two girls last saw each other at their mother's funeral. Coral attended McKinley Middle School in 1998. Prior to her disappearance, she had been getting into trouble for being truant from school, rebelling against her grandmother's rules, and associating with drug users. The DHS had investigated Janish for abusing and/or medically neglecting Coral 5 times. A male acquaintance who was in his mid-20s when Coral disappeared said he had regularly smoked crack cocaine with Coral and that Janish had offered him time alone with Coral in exchange for drugs. He said he noticed signs of physical abuse on Coral, and the girl complained her grandmother had mistreated her. Coral's loved ones describe her as an intelligent but angry, withdrawn teenager. She had missed so much school that foster care placement was being considered. For over a decade after Coral's disappearance, investigators said they believed she'd run away to escape the troubles in her life and possibly traveled to Los Angeles, California with an adult boyfriend. However, in July 2013, Janish was charged with her granddaughter's murder. A photo of her is posted below this case summary. Authorities stated she had always been a suspect in Coral's disappearance and had given inconsistent statements over the years. They believe her boyfriend, Bruce Strait, was also involved in Coral's death, but he died of alcohol-related complications in 2000. He had been released from prison shortly before Coral vanished, and she had accused him of sexual abuse. Strait allegedly said he wasn't going to return to prison because of her allegations. Investigators stated that during interrogations in 2011 and 2012, Janish admitted smoking crack cocaine and said her granddaughter was dead. She allegedly confessed to beating Coral to death with a hammer and said she and her boyfriend dismembered the body, but she altered and recanted her story more than once. In September 2015, she reached a plea deal with the prosecution and pleaded no contest to second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 9 years in prison. As Janish is already 75 years old, there's a distinct possibility she will not live long enough to be released. Foul play is suspected in Coral's case due to the circumstances involved. Her body has never been found.
Number 6.
Tammy was last seen at a youth shelter in the 500 block of Jefferson Street in St. Charles, Missouri on August 1, 1979. She had stayed there for only 2 days before she disappeared and has never been heard from again. Tammy was a chronic runaway who began getting in trouble in 1977 after her family moved across town. She began spending time with teenagers who drank and used drugs, and her family said she was too trusting and would have gotten into a stranger's vehicle. She was close to her father, however, and didn't get in touch with her family after her father died in 1988. Because she was a chronic runaway, Tammy's family wasn't initially concerned by her absence. However, after years passed without them hearing from her, they got worried and filed a missing persons report. Nathan D. Danny Williams is a suspect in Tammy's disappearance and in the 1989 abduction and presumed murder of 13-year-old Gina Brooks, whose body was never found. A photo of Williams is posted with this case summary. He and another man, Timothy R. Bellew, were charged with Gina's murder in 1999. The murder charge against Bellew was subsequently dropped for lack of evidence, and in 2003, the murder charge against Williams was also dropped, but he remained in prison on unrelated rape conviction. He's still the prime suspect in Gina's disappearance. Williams reportedly told 2 witnesses he'd abducted a 12-year-old girl off the street near a college in St. Charles in the late 1970s, raped her, stabbed her to death and buried her body. This would match the circumstances of Tammy's disappearance. She's the only child that age who disappeared from St. Charles during that time period and was never found, and the shelter she was staying in was just 4 blocks from Linwood College. There is no hard evidence tying him to Tammy's case, however, her disappearance remains unsolved.
Number 7.
Mahoney resided with her boyfriend in the 100 block of Lenox Avenue in Oneida, New York. She had studied husbandry at the State University of New York, SUNY Morrisville campus during the 1979 to 1980 school year and stated she wanted to become a veterinarian, but she did not return to school for the second year. Mahoney was last seen hitchhiking near the Glenwood Shopping Center on Route 46 in Oneida at 7:45 a.m. on May 8, 1981. She planned to travel to Hamilton, New York during the evening. Authorities believe that a group of unidentified young men gave Mahoney a ride to the Oneida Indian Nation territory, which occupies 32 acres of land along Route 46. Mahoney's boyfriend reported her as a missing person on May 11, 1981, 3 days after her disappearance. She has gone missing before, but always returned within a short time. Prior to May 1981, the longest period she had ever been gone was 18 days. She had been employed as a groom at Vernon Downs, but quit her job a week before she went missing. She did not tell anyone of this and left her apartment every morning as if she were going to work. She had applied for another job in the newsroom at the Oneida Daily Dispatch and stated on the application that she had left her previous job because it was too far away from her home. She often hitchhiked to work when she could not find friends to give her a ride. Mahoney and her boyfriend were planning to move out of their apartment in May 1981, and she left behind all her belongings packed for the move, including her toothbrush. Her family lived on Long Island, New York at the time of her disappearance. They stated she was close to them and kept in regular contact, and they did not believe she would have left without warning. Investigators believe that Mahoney was gang raped and murdered at a party inside a trailer on the Oneida Indian Nation territory shortly after she was last seen. Authorities received a tip that Mahoney's body was inside a building that burned down on Lenox Avenue on May 11. An extensive search of the area produced no clues as to her whereabouts. Mahoney's disappearance was reclassified as a probable homicide sometime afterwards. Investigators announced that they identified several male suspects in Mahoney's presumed murder in the spring of 2002. The men's names have not been publicly released, but not all of the suspects are members of the Oneida Indian Nation. Authorities said that dozens of witnesses were inside the trailer at the time of her homicide, and the murder suspects still live in the local area. The federal government will prosecute Mahoney's case since she was allegedly killed on Indian Nation property. Investigators cannot file charges against anyone until her body is recovered. A man's wallet was turned into authorities by an unidentified individual several days after Mahoney disappeared. The wallet was located on the territory, and investigators said it is connected to her case. The identity of its owner has not been divulged, but officials requested that the person who recovered the item contact detectives in order to obtain additional evidence. Someone scrawled a message and the names of 2 alleged suspects on a reward flyer posted in A Guy, a Gal and a Laundromat in Vernon, New York in March 2002. Investigators made a public plea for photos of the Indian Nation territory and any junk vehicles from May 1981. Around the same time, authorities announced that Mahoney's body may have been placed inside one of the cars immediately after her murder. Officials searched a gravel-covered lot near the Shako Y Cultural Center on the territory in late June 2002. A pond was located in the area at the time of Mahoney's disappearance but was filled in sometime afterwards. No evidence was uncovered during the search. Investigators said that they did not believe her remains were still inside the car, but materials related to her case may be inside the vehicle. Mahoney was born in the Long Island, New York area. Her case remains unsolved.
Number 8.
Lisa was last seen riding her bicycle in Walnut Creek, California at 7 p.m. on September 5, 1976. She was en route from her home in the 100 block of Los Cerros to a nearby BART, Bay Area Rapid Transit station at the time. She was supposed to return home by 8 p.m., but did not and has never been heard from again. Her parents reported her missing at 9 p.m. Lisa's bicycle was found in a grove of walnut trees at Heather Farms Park, near the Contra Costa Canal, 3 hours after she was last seen. A search of the canal turned up no clues as to her whereabouts, but witnesses said they had seen her at the park's entrance. Several witnesses reported seeing a Caucasian man driving a medium-sized motorcycle on Ignacio Valley Road at the intersection of Walnut Avenue, 2 blocks east of Heather Farms Park, at approximately 7:30 p.m. The man wasn't wearing a helmet and is described as being in his early 40s, with brown curly hair, a mustache and a chunky build. A Caucasian female child wearing a white helmet, aged between 8 and 12 years old, was riding the motorcycle with him. It hasn't been verified that the child was Lisa, and the man's identity has never been confirmed. Louis Richard Fresquez is the prime suspect in Lisa's disappearance. A photo of him is posted with this case summary. He was born in 1942, making him 34 years old in 1976. He is 5'5" and 140 pounds, with black hair and brown eyes. Fresquez was imprisoned for sex crimes between 1987 and 2012. He has never been charged in connection with Lisa's case due to a lack of evidence. She is missing under suspicious circumstances, and her case remains unsolved.